Pacers fans, welcome to the channel. An Indiana Pacers themed offseason preview here as we're continuing going throughout the teams in the lottery and focusing on offseason previews for them. And I'm really excited to be covering the Indiana Pacers today for a few different reasons. First of all, I think this fan base is really awesome. I think there's a lot of high intelligence in terms of basketball talk in this fan base. And I also think that the Pacers are in a really interesting spot for a team that has not had a top 9 pick since 1989. And the last time they had a top 10 pick was Paul George. They're finally in a position where they are guaranteed to have a top 9 selection. And I'm really excited to see how it plays out for Indiana. I think this is an awesome franchise. I think that Chad Buchanan, the GM there in Indiana, has done a really good job setting this franchise up, especially when they were at an interesting point of their franchise and their organization, given what they had on their roster going into the season to where we finally find them now at this point of the year. I do really want to commend the Pacers for everything that's gone on. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Also leave a like today on today's video if you are excited for the Indiana Pacers offseason, specifically the NBA draft. Let's go ahead and jump forward now into a video preview. What are we going to cover in today's offseason preview? Well, first we're going to talk about the 2021-2022 season, the record, the bright spots that I saw from this team, and there's a lot of them. Key decisions to make for Chad Buchanan and also Rick Carlisle, the head coach, NBA draft picks, which assets they have pre-lottery, and also NBA draft targets that they could look at. We're going to talk about exactly where they could fall in the lottery and everything of that sort. We're going to also look at key players headed toward free agency. Who could they lose out on? And also we're going to talk about NBA free agency in itself. Who do they want to maybe go target? For me, when I look at Indiana, there's one specific need on this team that I think they need to address this offseason. They could potentially do it through the draft. I also think they should really try hard in the offseason to add to this roster. And then I'm going to cover next season a little bit. I'm going to talk about what I predict for this team, maybe what the goal should be for this roster and this organization, because I think the Pacers, a team that habitually was in the playoffs, very likely could get back there next season. So we'll talk about that and more moving forward. 2021-2022 season, of course, not quite the year you'd hope to have with Rick Carlisle as your head coach in year one, only winning 25 games with 57 losses. So not a great situation with how everything played out, but I was very aware that this was going to be the way it is. For Pacers fans, just so you know, I'm a Mavericks fan, so I know Rick Carlisle almost better than anyone. And I knew when you guys hired him that this was going to be a little bit more of a long-term process, and I think a lot of other people assumed, specifically because of the construction of your roster, the way it was built, just clearly did not fit what Rick Carlisle wants to do as a head coach. Very pick and roll heavy offense, and you just didn't really have that. Domantas Sabonis was the hub of the offense. It was just different styles, and they were really clashing. I think they've really cleared everything up, which is going to lead us to our first bright spot here, and that is Tyrese Haliburton. I mean, what a season for him specifically. Once he got traded to Indiana, they put the ball in his hands, and he was awesome. Leave a like if you're excited about Tyrese Haliburton, because this kid is phenomenal. He's really fun to watch, and I think the Pacers absolutely killed the Sabonis trade. He averaged 17.5 points a game for Indiana in the 26 games he played with them post-trade deadline. He shot 50% from the field and 41% from three in that stretch as well. And here's the kicker, averaged 9.5 assists a game in that stretch as well. He is a very talented point guard who perfectly fits what Rick Carlisle wants to do. I talked about that pick and roll heavy offense. You guys saw it. Tyrese Haliburton, he's got the brains, he's got the power, he's got the skill set to do that. He can run that pick and roll style offense. He's a very good playmaker and facilitator. And it was crazy to me because when in his draft class, everyone talked about him as maybe being an off-ball guard. And I thought, wow, for Iowa State, he did a lot of the ball handling and decision-making, and he was really good in that area. So it was kind of perplexing to me. I had him top 5 in that class, whereas a lot of other people did not look at him as favorably. So for me, Tyrese Haliburton, this was a phenomenal steal for Indiana, being able to get him. Now, you did give up a lot in Domantas Sabonis, but being able to bring in Haliburton, that was huge. Chris Duarte as well, another bright spot, a player who they took in the lottery, and that came with a few shots from fans and also from outside media. When you draft a player as old as Duarte in the lottery, it kind of opens yourself up to a little bit of naysaying, a little bit of criticism. But Duarte was really good again this rookie season. And he was one of the players that I thought was more ready to come into the NBA. Now, I still have some questions what his long-term upside looks like, but I think he showed enough flashes that you can at least be really excited about this kid. And I think the backcourt pairing of Haliburton and Duarte is something to be excited about. Isaiah Jackson, their other first-round pick they used last year in a trade with the Washington Wizards where they sent out Aaron Holiday. That was a phenomenal move. And again, I have to commend Chad Buchanan for that. I loved Isaiah Jackson. I actually had him top 14 on my board. I had him as a lottery level player in last year's draft, and he fell all the way into the 20s to Indiana, and he's the perfect center for Rick Carlisle. Now, he only played in 36 games this year as a rookie, missed some time here and there, but when you're looking at Isaiah Jackson, the thing that's clear and evident about him is his ability to be a rim running center. He can screen and roll, and he protects the rim very well. He was one of the top players in the league when it comes to blocks per minute as a rookie. And I'm not saying just compared to other rookies, I'm saying compared to everybody. So for me, Isaiah Jackson, really good find here because it solidifies your backup center spot. For me, Goga Bitadze just was never going to be a fit for Rick Carlisle, and I think we've seen Isaiah Jackson surpass him as the long-term backup big. And then Jalen Smith, another example here of finding a really talented player who was a former top 10 pick, actually was drafted above Tyrese Haliburton by one pick in the same draft. And Jalen Smith comes into Indiana, had a career average of 6 points a game with Phoenix, and put up 13 points a game in his time with Indiana. And was also averaging 7.5 rebounds a night on good efficiency. So you see another big who's a pretty good fit with Tyrese Haliburton. And I just want to say it again, Chad Buchanan, Pacers fans, you guys got to give him a round of applause because he has done such a good job adding young talent to this roster when they haven't really had a lot of premium assets outside of Domantas Sabonis. The fact that you got Jalen Smith for Torrey Craig, that's insane. You look at getting Isaiah Jackson in the 20s for Aaron Holiday, that's a good move. And getting Chris Duarte at 13, that's a good pickup as well. So for me, I think the Pacers have done a phenomenal job with where they were, and they are starting to find that identity with Carlisle. And I'm really happy about that because I think he can be a really good coach. He's one of the most winning coaches of all time in the NBA. And I think he knows what he's doing and what he wants, but I think he coaches to a specific style, and you need players that fit that style, maybe more so than you do with other coaches. But when he has that style, he's one of the best coaches in the world. So again, really, really good steps in the right direction here for Indiana. Now it's about trying to critique and really fit the rest to it. Miles Turner, had he been healthy this year, he was in the midst of another great season, averaging about 13 points a game. But the biggest thing is 3 blocks a game, and we didn't even really get to see too much of Miles Turner with Tyrese Haliburton. Those two guys are going to make music together. Very awesome combination. The pick and roll game between the two of them, the pick and pop game. There's going to be so many layers that they open up to it. Anyone who watched Tyrese Haliburton with Sacramento knows how productive he was with Richaun Holmes. Now you make Richaun Holmes a much more talented, much more physically imposing player, especially around the rim. And you've got some scary stuff on here. This is going to be scary hours for certain teams trying to deal with this Haliburton-Turner pick and roll. And then the flexibility here. That's another big thing for me. They opened it up as well with the Caris LeVert trade for Ricky Rubio. They opened up their long-term contract situation to a point where they have quite a bit of cap space as well. So this team is in a really good position. Pacers fans, I feel like I'm blushing over where you guys are at, but Chad Buchanan, I just feel like I have to keep saying it. He has done such a good job with this team. A year ago, I would have been looking down on this team fairly harshly, saying, I don't know what the direction is. Does Sabonis and Turner win in the NBA with Brogdon? I don't know. But now they've got a good collection of players. They've got a lot of good youth, and they've got a direction with Carlisle that I can actually really buy into. Moving into key decisions. Now, this is where we're talking about the flexibility. They're projected about $25 million in cap space of practical salary cap space, which is a lot. $25 million is very sizable. In fact, I think that's in the top 5 most cap space this offseason, which is crazy because I think the Pacers are more talented than some of the other teams that do have cap space as well. And then you also have contracts that you maybe want to make some decisions about. Malcolm Brogdon, $22.5 million a year. Buddy Hield's on the contract for another 18.56 this season. Goga Bitadze is at 4.5. And then Jalen Smith headed to unrestricted free agency. So you have some decisions here. I could see Goga Bitadze getting moved. He's a former near lottery selection. And I could see him getting traded out for maybe a couple second-round picks or just one second-round pick or maybe a cap filler type of move here to free up a little bit of money. And then I could see Buddy Hield getting traded. We've heard rumors about Brogdon and Buddy Hield for Russell Westbrook. I don't think that comes to fruition. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me if I'm Indiana. And remember, Rick Carlisle was the coach in Dallas when Mark Cuban said that, Russell Westbrook's not a superstar. And then Rick Carlisle really didn't fight him back on that. So I don't know if Carlisle plus Westbrook makes a ton of sense. Now, I know the offensive standpoint of it where, hey, pick and roll heavy offense. I think Russ can be pretty successful in that. But ultimately, do you want to stunt some of the touches from Tyrese Haliburton, who I think he would still play well off of Russ, don't get me wrong. But is that really what the Pacers want to do? I know it could open up some long-term cap space for them. but I'm not sure if that gets the job done for me. If I'm going to move Brogdon and Hield in a deal for Russ, I just don't know if I love that for Indiana. So I don't think I would do that myself. Unless I was getting, maybe some of those future firsts from LA, then I would probably consider it because it could be a nice bridge way to add more talent in the future. And then Jalen Smith, I want to keep him around if I'm Indiana. I would like to keep him. Now, the difficulty here is Phoenix didn't pick up his team option, so he's actually unrestricted, not restricted, which is very rare to see something like this. But I think they should try and keep him around. He played himself into another contract, I think. So for me, Jalen Smith, I'd like to keep them at a pretty decent price point. Moving forward to NBA draft picks. These are the picks that they have in this year's draft. They have their own first round pick, which right now has the 5th best odds in the NBA draft lottery. I do have an NBA draft lottery video up on the channel. I'm going to put a card for it here so you guys can watch that video after this video, because I think it is really helpful in explaining exactly how the lottery works, the odds for the Indiana Pacers, and how possible it is that they could be picking one in the draft and potentially how low they could be picking as well. A 2022 Cavaliers first round pick, which was a really good trade of Caris LeVert. I want to commend them on that. I am recording this before the play-in. So by the time you're watching this, very possible the results of where Cleveland is at in the play-in, but I am recording this beforehand. This pick could potentially be a lottery selection. Jared Allen's going to miss the first play-in game against Brooklyn, it sounds like. So I would have to pick Brooklyn over Cleveland in that game. And then it's one loss away from the Cavaliers having the lottery pick here, which could be huge for Indiana. And then you see 2 second-rounders here as well, one of them being really good from the Houston Rockets, and then also the Suns, which is going to be probably the last pick of the draft. But ultimately, you have 2 good picks here with the Rockets and Suns pick. And you can use these to supplement the trio of Haliburton, Duarte, and Turner, which I really like. And then you still have Isaiah Jackson. I mean, you got a lot of talent here on this roster. And if they win the lottery, this team is going to be terrifying. Let's move into some of the draft needs. For me, it's all about wings. You need wings, wings, wings. And depending on how they evaluate Jalen Smith internally, an athletic big could help Haliburton as well. However, I don't necessarily see that being their biggest MO, but if they're at a certain spot in the draft, I don't think it's completely off the table. For me, the top 10 picks that they could target, assuming that there's no luck, assuming they don't move up in the lottery and they have pick 5 or lower, which is they could have 5, 6, 7, or 8. For me, the player I think that they should target here is maybe AJ Griffin or Benedict Mathurin. Those are the 2 guys I've been mocking to Indiana most consistently because AJ Griffin, a really good 3-point shooter. He's actually the son of Adrian Griffin, who used to play in the NBA and was a really nice player in his own right. But AJ Griffin, I think, even better than his father, and I think he's going to have a really nice career. He's got really projectable size, length. He's very, very talented as a shooter as well. He shot nearly 50% on catch and shoot threes this past season for Duke, which is really, really high on pretty good volume. So for me, AJ Griffin makes a lot of sense. Benedict Mathurin also makes sense if you're looking for another guy who can be dynamic and get to the rim. He maybe steps on Duarte's toes a little bit in comparison to Griffin, where Griffin plays more of a consistent off-ball role as either a 3 or 4, where Mathurin's probably more projectable as a 2 or 3. But the reason why I think he makes so much sense, I think he's a better long-term upside Tim Hardaway Jr., a player who's more athletic, a little bit better ball handler, and a better 3-point shooter coming into the league. And I think he's also got more defensive upside than Hardaway Jr. But we saw THJ have a ton of success under Rick Carlisle to the point where, he got a really nice contract because of Carlisle. So I think Benedict Mathurin could find a ton of success playing for Carlisle with the Pacers. He's a sophomore out of Arizona. I do really like him. On this list, I also have Shaedon Sharpe out of Kentucky. I have Kentucky in quotes there because he hasn't technically really played there, obviously, because, he's a high school student. And it's very possible he does not come out for this draft. And if he doesn't, then obviously just omit his name from this. But if he does come out, I think his athleticism could be really intriguing for Indiana, who I think they just need more athletes on this team to complement Haliburton, who's not the most athletic player in his own right. And then you look at Keegan Murray and Jeremy Sohan, 2 forwards here who probably play the power forward position. Sohan makes a lot of sense for Carlisle in terms of a defensive-minded forward who can guard 1 through 5, very versatile defensively. And could really make this team scary if you have a front court of Sohan next to Miles Turner and you bring Isaiah Jackson off the bench. It is going to be hard to score at the rim against the Pacers if they have that lineup. And then Keegan Murray just kind of does a lot of things well. Not necessarily great at one individual thing. Averaged 22 points a game for Iowa last year without really being the focal point. I mean, obviously he was their best scorer and they knew that, but it's not like they were running sets for him every play. He just finds ways to score. He finds ways to be productive. And I think a player that Rick Carlisle would end up loving in Keegan Murray there, because, you know, the way he works, the way he attacks the glass, I think he would be an early favorite for Rick Carlisle. So those 5 make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, if they do move up in the lottery, and I'm hoping they do, Pacers fans, I'm hoping you guys do. If you're excited for the draft lottery, leave a like. I hope that they would maybe look at Chet Holmgren or maybe Jabari Smith. Those are the 2 guys that I would target for them. You know, Jaden Ivey, I love Jaden Ivey. I wouldn't rule him out either. I think he could be really special next to Haliburton as well. But we'll see exactly which way Indiana would go. I'm hoping for you guys. Okay, I really am, that you guys can move up in the draft lottery. I think you guys deserve it. The way you've managed this roster, very, very good. And, you know, sometimes luck plays itself out in a way that would help teams that have been trying to set themselves up for success. Moving forward here now, other first-round targets. Remember, with this Cleveland Cavaliers pick, it depends on where it falls, but there's some guys that make some sense. You could look at center Mark Williams from Duke. He's that athletic type of big that I'm talking about, where, you know, if you have injury concerns with Isaiah Jackson and Miles Turner, who both missed a lot of time, you bring in Mark Williams. You have a third center in there who can protect the rim, run in transition, really good screen and roll guy, catches a lot of lobs, another really good fifth. Otherwise, here you just look for really talented forwards and guards. And there's a few guys that I want to talk about here with this. So Kendall Brown, kind of a connector piece from Baylor. He can make some sense here. Agbaji, one of the more talented players, one of the more NBA ready players. So if you want to plug in a 3 who's going to be very successful early on and kind of help bridge the team and win more games right away, Agbaji makes a lot of sense. Malachi Branham, kind of the opposite here. He's younger, but as the season carried on for Ohio State as a freshman, he got a lot better throughout the season. Kind of took himself from being an undrafted type of prospect all the way up to being a near lottery level player. And I could see him going in the lottery, although I think he'll go right outside the lottery. He could be an intriguing player. EJ Liddell, fairly similar to what we talked about with a player earlier in Sohan, simply because he's a very versatile defensive forward who can guard multiple positions, can protect the rim. And then Hugo Bassan, I actually included him on here because if you're looking at a move where Buddy Hield maybe gets traded, you want to probably bring in another shooter off the bench, and that would be Hugo Bassan from New Zealand. And he's been a very successful player overseas, averaging like 15 points a game right now for the New Zealand Breakers. And he shoots the ball very well. He's going to be very dangerous running off of pin down flare screens and all the such. So I think Hugo Bassan, very intriguing player. I do have a scouting profile video up on him on the channel. So make sure to go check that out after today's video as well. Hugo Bassan, very intriguing prospect. Moving on now into NBA free agency. We're not going to cover those second round picks, but there are some good players that they could get. We do have a second round mock draft on the channel as well. For NBA free agency, the Pacers are projected again roughly that $25 million in cap space. And the goals here should be find a starting level forward in free agency. That is really tough to do. There's not very many starting level forwards in free agency this offseason. Then you want to add depth to the front court and you want to improve the defense. Those are the goals here for Rick Carlisle's squad. You got to add more talent around your young core. So for me, here's some targets, and you can see they're all forwards, and they all are at varying levels. Thaddeus Young, a reunion to Indiana, could make some sense here. He's an unrestricted free agent, got traded to Toronto this offseason. So remember, he did not get to choose to go to Toronto, just ended up getting routed there from San Antonio. So maybe he's saying, yeah, I kind of want to go back into the United States, and why not to a city I've already played in for the Indiana Pacers? That could make a lot of sense for me here, and he's the closest to being a starting level forward on this list. You also have Robert Covington, who's probably the next best starting level player on here from the LA Clippers. Again, another player who got traded, didn't get to choose to go to the Clippers, ended up there. But I think, you know, ultimately Covington probably sticks with the Clippers. However, if he does, you know, go somewhere else, I think if you send him to Indiana, you add a ton of length, really good defensive player who offensively, you know, maybe a little overrated as an offensive player, as a three-point shooter, only shoots about 35% from three, but he'll knock down open ones, which is good. And he's a veteran. He knows how to play the game. Then you get into the other area where we see a guy like Kyle Anderson, who maybe would be more of a bench leader, maybe like a 6th or 7th man type, which I think would be helpful when Haliburton comes off the floor. And depending on what they do with Brogdon, which is really the biggest question for me, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with Brogdon. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section. Does Brogdon get traded or not? But if Kyle Anderson's coming off the bench for you, he could be kind of a point forward, you know, get the offense moving. Mr. Slow-Mo himself is a very fun player to watch, so I think he would be an intriguing player to grab for Indiana. And with their cap space, I mean, they could grab a collection, 2 to 3 of these guys, really, too, if they wanted to. Thaddeus Young, Robert Covington, those are probably players around that, you know, mid-level exception number at $10 million. And then you could use, you could maybe even end up with a collection of Thad Young, Robert Covington, and Kyle Anderson. And then other players on this list, Markieff Morris missed a lot of time this year because of that whiplash injury from Nikola Jokic. Yuta Watanabe, a very aggressive defender. He's going to rotate. He plays within the system. Another player that I just know Rick Carlisle would love to have, but he is restricted. So I think Toronto's going to try and hold on to him unless they don't want his cap hit, which I'm not sure, but I think that they're going to try and keep him around. Daniil House from Utah, he's actually really stepped up for them this year. He's just been sticking around the league as a 3-and-D wing. Not really great at either, but he's going to try his hardest at both. So another budget signing there. You probably get him at like $4 or $5 million a year. And then Josh Okogie kind of fell out of love there with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's restricted, but I don't think they're going to keep his cap hit and his cap hold. I think they're going to rescind that, and he will be an unrestricted free agent, I would guess, just given the fact that he hasn't gotten consistent minutes there in Minnesota. I could see his minutes going to Nathan Knight in the future. So for me, Josh Okogie probably hits unrestricted free agency, and I could see the Pacers having some interest in him. He's had some pretty good performances against the Mavericks back when Carlisle was the coach there. So I think Okogie may be on the Pacers' radar, but not necessarily one of those league candidates. Probably wouldn't get signed on days 1 or 2 of free agency. Probably more of a back-end signing for near the veteran minimum. But I do think it could be a pretty decent pickup for Indiana. And it goes to show there are quite a few wings out here that could help this team win some more games, because I do think they are ready for another massive step forward, especially assuming if Miles Turner and Isaiah Jackson can stay healthy and you develop that chemistry between Haliburton and those bigs. Moving into next season, and this is really where it gets important, right? Offseason's always fun and enjoyable, but it really comes down to, can they win? And I think so. I think they're ready for a big jump. It's going to be dependent on Haliburton. Can he turn into a 20-10 player? He's been a 17-9 guy for them this year. If he can turn into 20-10, you probably see another jump from this team, specifically if Miles Turner's screen setting and capabilities of pick and roll type of big. I mean, Pacers could be really, really good moving forward. So I'm hoping that in Carlisle's system, we see some massive steps forward for this team. And I hope the Pacers, get to that next level for where they want to go. And I think it's possible. I could see them being a play-in team, maybe even a playoff team next season. The East is incredibly tough, but I think they're ready for that jump, especially since Haliburton is going to be entering his 3rd year in the league. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Also subscribe to the channel if you are new. Pacers fans, you guys are so awesome. Leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Thanks again so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.